Ambassador Telek of the Galactic Concord nervously adjusted his breathing apparatus as he prepared for humanity's formal introduction to interstellar society. The intelligence briefings had been clear. Humans were a primitive species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel, with perhaps 3 or 4 colony worlds to their name and limited military capabilities. All preparations complete, Ambassador, said his aide, Noro. The human delegation should arrive within the hour. Telek nodded, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. The diplomatic vessel hung in neutral space, accompanied by 3 escort ships, standard protocol for meeting new species. The waiting stretched longer than expected. Telek was about to contact Central Command when the sensor officer called out. Multiple hyperspace ruptures detected. Relief washed through Telek. Finally, put the human ship on screen. The view screen flickered to life, and Telek's relief instantly evaporated. Not one ship but hundreds materialized in perfect formation. Massive warships bristling with weaponry that conquered analysts had deemed beyond human technological capabilities. By the void, whispered Noro. Those aren't diplomatic vessels. Telek's scales paled to a sickly white as the human fleet surrounded the Concord ships with military precision. This was not at all what the intelligence reports had suggested. Telek gripped the edge of the command table, his 3-fingered hands trembling. The largest human vessel was approaching them directly. It was enormous, at least 5 times the size of their diplomatic cruiser. Sleek black metal with pulsing blue energy lines running along its hull. Weapon ports dotted its surface like hungry mouths. Should we raise shields, Ambassador? Asked the security chief. No, Telek snapped. That could be seen as hostile. We are diplomats, not warriors. But even as he said this, fear coiled in his 4 stomachs. The Concord had encountered many new species, but none had hidden their true strength so completely. The communications panel chimed. Telek swallowed hard and nodded to the officer. This is Admiral Lee of the United Earth Defense Fleet, came a calm voice as a human face appeared on screen. The being had dark eyes and smooth skin. We will escort your vessel to the meeting coordinates. Telek found his voice at last. Admiral, this is unexpected. Our intelligence suggested a much smaller human presence. The human's face showed no emotion. Your intelligence was incomplete. We prefer it that way. The transmission ended abruptly. Noro moved closer to Telek, keeping his voice low. Sir, I count over 300 vessels. Many appear to be dreadnought class. The energy readings are concerning. Telek's breathing quickened, making his apparatus whistle. How did we miss this? The council assured me humans were barely past their planetary phase. The ship suddenly shuddered as a blue light enveloped them. On the screen, they watched their vessel being pulled along by some kind of energy beam. They've locked us in a tractor field, reported the pilot. We cannot break free without risking structural damage. Telek felt trapped, but he forced himself to think like a diplomat. Perhaps this show of force was simply the human way of establishing respect before negotiations. Sir, called the sensor officer, I'm detecting more ships emerging from hyperspace at the edges of the system. Our long-range scans suggest possibly thousands. The bridge fell silent. Even the most powerful Concord species didn't maintain fleets of that size. The resources required would bankrupt most economies. Noro's voice was barely audible. What do they want? Telek had no answer. In all his years of diplomatic service, he had never felt so unprepared. The Concord's standard approach to new species was to impress them with superior technology and numbers, then offer membership under terms favorable to existing Concord powers. That strategy seemed laughably inadequate now. A junior officer approached with a datapad. Sir, we're receiving a data packet from the human flagship. Sir, it's a complete map of Concord space, including our classified military installations. Telek stared at the map in disbelief. Secret bases, hidden colonies, restricted zones, all clearly marked with precise coordinates. There's more, sir, the officer continued. They've included files on each Concord Council member, including private communications between representatives. Telek sank into his command chair. The humans hadn't just been hiding their military strength. They had been watching the Concord, studying them, for who knows how long. Their ship continued its forced journey, now surrounded by a tight formation of human vessels. Through the viewports, Telek could see fighters performing complex maneuvers, a clear demonstration of their pilot skills. "Ambassador," said Noro softly, "I believe we should contact the Council immediately." Telek shook his head. "And tell them what? That we've completely misjudged a species that now holds us at their mercy. That our vaunted intelligence service missed a fleet that could challenge the entire Concord." The communications panel chimed again. "Ambassador Telek," came Admiral Lee's voice, "we will be docking in 30 minutes. Ambassador Han looks forward to discussing humanity's terms for joining the galactic community." The emphasis on terms was subtle but unmistakable. Telek realized with a sinking feeling that the humans weren't here to be welcomed into the Concord. They were here to set conditions. As the massive human flagship loomed ever closer on the view screen, Telek wondered if this day would be remembered as the beginning of a new era in galactic politics, or the beginning of the end for Concord dominance among the stars. "Human shuttle requesting permission to dock," the communications officer announced, voice quavering. Telek struggled to compose himself. Grant permission." When the airlock finally opened, Telek was surprised to see only 5 humans enter, 1 woman in formal attire, and 4 security personnel. The lead human was shorter than Telek had expected, with a calm demeanor that contrasted sharply with the military might she represented. "Ambassador Telek," she said with a slight bow. "I am Ambassador Kim of the United Earth Federation. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Telek attempted to establish diplomatic dominance as he'd been trained. "The Concord welcomes humanity to the galactic community. We look forward to guiding your species through its early development." Ambassador Kim smiled politely. "While we appreciate the sentiment, I believe there's been a misunderstanding about humanity's current status." She activated a holographic display showing a map of space that made Telek's heart sink. Not 4 colonies, but nearly 200 human-controlled systems blinked into view. "We've been aware of the Concord for approximately 40 Earth years," Kim continued. "We thought it prudent to observe before making formal contact." The holographic map rotated slowly, each human-controlled system glowing with a soft blue light. Telek counted silently. 50, 100, 150. His outer membrane paled further. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Our deep space probes would have detected such expansion." Ambassador Kim's smile remained fixed. "Your probes did detect us, Ambassador. We simply redirected them. Sometimes we fed them false data. Other times we let them report only what we wanted you to see." One of the human security guards shifted slightly, and Telek noticed something strange about their uniforms. No visible weapons, yet they carried themselves with absolute confidence. "You've been watching us," Telek managed to say. "Of course. Just as you watch emerging species," Kim replied. She gestured, and the hologram changed to show recordings of Concord ships observing primitive worlds. "We intercepted these transmissions 15 years ago. Fascinating protocols you have for determining which species deserve contact and which should remain. How did your council put it? Isolated until proper cultural development occurs." Noro stepped forward. "Ambassador Kim, surely you understand the need to protect developing civilizations from..." "From what, exactly?" Kim interrupted, her voice still pleasant, but now edged with steel. "From making their own choices. From developing outside Concord influence." The hologram shifted again, displaying classified Concord documents about resource extraction from worlds with pre-spaceflight civilizations. "How did you get these files?" Telek demanded, his diplomatic composure cracking. "The same way we learned your language, customs, and hierarchical structures," Kim said simply. "We listened, we watched, and occasionally We had conversations with those Concord members who felt disillusioned with current policies. Telek's secondary hearts began pounding rapidly. You've been subverting our member states. Building relationships, Kim corrected. Many found our approach refreshing after centuries of Concord dominance. The security chief whispered urgently in Telek's ear. Sir, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the human guards. They may be enhanced with some kind of technology we don't recognize. Kim tilted her head. Your security chief seems concerned about my team. Please assure him they're only here for my protection. Standard protocol. Telek fought to regain control of the situation. Ambassador Kim, while this display of clandestine information gathering is impressive, the Concord has procedures for integrating new species. All members begin with probationary status. That won't be necessary, Kim interrupted smoothly. The United Earth Federation isn't seeking to join the Concord under existing frameworks. She raised her hand, and the hologram changed again, showing human ships positioned near key Concord worlds. These embassy vessels are currently moving into position throughout Concord space, Kim explained. They carry our diplomatic personnel and cultural exchange teams. This wasn't authorized. Telek exclaimed. You can't simply, can't we? Kim asked softly. Your own protocols state that any species with sufficient interstellar presence may establish diplomatic outposts with prior notification. We're notifying you now. Noro leaned close to Telek. Sir, she's exploiting the letter of our laws while violating their spirit. Kim overheard. An interesting perspective. We reviewed your legal codes extensively. They seem designed to favor established powers while limiting new entrants. We chose not to accept those limitations. Outside the viewports, the human fleet maintained its perfect formation. Telek couldn't help but notice how their ships moved in precise coordination, without the slight positioning errors common even in elite Concord squadrons. What do you want? Telek finally asked, abandoning pretense. Ambassador Kim's expression softened slightly. Exactly what I said. Diplomatic relations, but as equals, not as supplicants. Humanity won't be guided or managed or developed according to Concord expectations. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. We could have conquered half your territory before you even knew we existed, Ambassador. Instead, we're here talking. That should tell you something about our intentions. Telek felt a chill at the casual way she described potential military action against the mighty Concord. The Council won't accept this approach, he warned. They will, Kim said with absolute certainty, because the alternative is acknowledging they've lost control of the narrative. That a primitive species has been operating within their borders for decades without detection. She deactivated the hologram. Now shall we discuss the actual terms of our relationship, or do you need time to consult with your superiors? Telek looked at the small human woman standing before him, then at the vast fleet visible through the viewport. In that moment, he realized the Concord's greatest mistake wasn't underestimating human military capability. It was assuming that newcomers to the galactic stage would accept the established order without question. I believe, Telek said carefully, this conversation should continue at the Concord Council chambers, with all representatives present. Ambassador Kim nodded. My thoughts exactly. Our flagship can transport us there in 6 hours. Your fastest ships would take 3 days, I believe. Another demonstration of superiority, delivered with a smile. Telek had never felt more out of his depth in all his diplomatic career. Impossible, Telek sputtered. Our surveys showed. What we wanted you to see, Kim interrupted gently. We noticed how the Concord tends to absorb species that appear vulnerable, while establishing more equitable relationships with those demonstrating significant military capability. Telek's aide rushed in, datapad clutched in trembling hands. Ambassador, we're receiving reports of human vessels appearing near every major Concord world. Kim nodded. Those are our embassy ships taking position. Standard protocol for establishing diplomatic relations. The implications crashed down on Telek. The Concord, which had dominated interstellar politics for millennia, had been thoroughly outmaneuvered by a species they'd dismissed as primitive. "You've been watching us," Telek said, his voice hollow. "Yes, and we've already established informal alliances with several of your member species who felt underrepresented in Concord affairs." Telek slumped into his seat. The galaxy as he knew it had changed forever. The diplomatic chamber fell silent. Even the soft humming of the ship's engine seemed muted, as if the vessel itself was holding its breath. Telek's 6 eyes blinked rapidly in sequence, a sign of extreme distress among his species. He forced his breathing to slow, the apparatus at his throat whistling slightly as it adjusted to his changing respiration. "Which species?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ambassador Kim tilted her head slightly. "I think you already know, Ambassador." And he did. The rebellious Moda, always complaining about resource allocations. The enigmatic Boer, whose territories bordered several emerging civilizations. The ancient Thule, whose technological expertise was crucial to Concord infrastructure. "They would not betray the Concord," Telek said, but doubt colored his words. Kim smiled. "Is it betrayal to seek fair treatment? The Moda have submitted 73 formal grievances in the past decade, all dismissed by the Council." On the wall screen behind her, documentation of the Moda complaints appeared, official Concord seals visible on each rejected petition. Telek recognized his own signature on several. Noro approached, still clutching the datapad. "Ambassador, I'm receiving urgent communications from the Council. They're demanding to know why human ships are in orbit around 17 core worlds." 23 now, Kim corrected calmly. "The remaining fleets will reach their positions within the hour." Telek felt his body temperature dropping, a physiological response to extreme stress in his species. "You're deploying military vessels throughout Concord space without authorization. This is an act-off." "They're not military vessels," Kim interrupted. "Each is registered as a diplomatic carrier, consistent with Concord regulations regarding first contact protocols. Article 17, Section 4 of your own charter permits new species to establish diplomatic presence simultaneously with multiple member states." "That provision was never meant to be used this way," Telek protested. "Perhaps those who wrote it should have been more precise," Kim replied. "We studied your legal frameworks extensively. You've built a system of carefully worded rules that appear fair on the surface while maintaining power imbalances beneath. We simply found the gaps in your carefully constructed system." A junior officer approached hesitantly. "Ambassador Telek, we're receiving transmissions from the Thule High Council. They're welcoming the human diplomatic vessels." Telek's outer membrane paled further. The Thule were founding members of the Concord, their support essential to maintaining central authority. "Show me," he demanded. The screen shifted to show Thule representatives greeting humans on their homeworld. The formal exchange of credentials was already underway, a process that typically took months of preparation. "How long have you been in contact with the Thule?" Telek asked, his voice strained. 12 of your years," Kim answered. "They were particularly interested in our approach to quantum computing. We found their crystalline architecture fascinating in return. A mutually beneficial exchange." Telek felt as if the deck were tilting beneath him. 12 years. Humans had been speaking with one of the most influential Concord species for 12 years, and not a single intelligence report had hinted at it. "What else have you hidden from us?" he asked. Ambassador Kim's expression remained neutral. "Perhaps the better question is, what have your own member species hidden from you?" The screen changed again, showing a montage of meetings between humans and various Concord races. The timestamps indicating these exchanges had been happening for years. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, technological collaborations, all conducted without the Concord's knowledge or approval. "Impossible," Telek whispered. "Our surveillance networks are impressive but predictable," Kim said. "Your patterns of monitoring created blind spots we could exploit. And some of your member species were quite helpful in identifying those blind spots. Noro slumped into a chair beside Telek. The council is in emergency session. They're demanding we bring you there immediately. We would be happy to address the full council, Kim said, as if she had been invited rather than summoned. Our diplomatic cruiser can have us there in 3 hours. The council chambers are 14 light-years from here, Telek said. Kim nodded. Yes, as I said, 3 hours. Another casual demonstration of technological superiority. The fastest Concorde vessels would need at least a day for such a journey. A security alert flashed on the main screen. Concorde military vessels were being dispatched from nearby bases. Your military is mobilizing, Kim observed. I would suggest they exercise caution. Our ships are under strict defensive protocols only, but they will protect themselves if threatened. Telek felt a surge of anger. You claim peaceful intentions while positioning forces throughout our territory and revealing secret alliances with our members. What would you call such actions if we had done this to Earth? For the first time, Kim's composed expression faltered slightly. We would call it Tuesday, Ambassador. Telek blinked in confusion. Earth history is filled with more powerful nations manipulating less developed ones, Kim explained. Colonization, resource extraction, protection that served only the protector. We learned those lessons painfully. Her voice hardened. We recognize the same patterns in how the Concorde deals with emerging species. We chose not to let humanity become another entry in your collection. A new alert sounded. Priority communication from the Concorde High Council itself. Telek hesitated before accepting it. The stern face of High Counselor Bach appeared. Ambassador Telek, you will bring the human representative to the council immediately. This situation is unprecedented. Kim stepped forward into view of the transmission. High Counselor, I am Ambassador Kim. We look forward to addressing the council and establishing formal diplomatic relations between humanity and the Concorde. Bach's expression darkened. Your vessels are to withdraw from Concorde space immediately. This aggressive deployment violates multiple. No laws have been broken, Kim interrupted calmly. We've studied your legal codes extensively and have complied with all technical requirements. If you wish to discuss the spirit rather than the letter of your laws, we're prepared for that conversation as well. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Bach spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. We will expect you before the full council in 6 hours. We'll be there in 3, Kim replied. As the transmission ended, Telek looked at the human ambassador with new understanding. Humanity hadn't just outmaneuvered the Concorde militarily or diplomatically. They had studied the Concorde's psychological weaknesses, its systemic flaws, its hidden power dynamics. The galaxy truly has changed, Telek said quietly. Kim's expression softened slightly. Change was inevitable, Ambassador. We simply accelerated the timeline. Looking out at the vast human fleet surrounding his small diplomatic vessel, Telek wondered if the Concorde would survive the change intact, or if humanity's arrival marked the beginning of its end. The United Earth Federation proposes immediate admission to the Galactic Concorde, Ambassador Kim stated, with full voting rights comparable to founding members. Telek nearly choked. Impossible. New species serve a probationary period of at least 50 cycles before. We're also requesting reforms regarding developing species protection. Kim continued as if Telek hadn't spoken. Our analysts have identified 17 exploitative trade agreements that must be renegotiated. Kim slid a data crystal across the table. This contains evidence of systematic exploitation of pre-FTL civilizations by Concorde mining corporations, in direct violation of your own founding charter. Telek examined the evidence with growing horror. Everything was meticulously documented. Additionally, Kim said, her voice hardening slightly, we've discovered 3 sentient species being deliberately kept isolated for resource exploitation. Telek realized these weren't requests. They were demands backed by the overwhelming force surrounding his ship. The council chamber buzzed with angry voices. Representatives from 83 spacefaring civilizations filled the vast circular room, their varied anatomy requiring specialized seating arrangements. The normally orderly proceedings had dissolved into chaos when Ambassador Kim had presented humanity's terms. High Counselor Bach pounded his ceremonial staff against the floor, the boom echoing through the chamber. Order. We will have order. Gradually, the noise subsided. All eyes turned to the small human figure standing calmly at the center of the speaking platform. Ambassador Kim seemed entirely untroubled by the hostile atmosphere. "Your demands are unprecedented," Bach said, his massive frame towering over the human. "No species has ever joined the Concorde without completing the established integration protocols. No species has ever approached the Concorde with our level of preparation," Kim replied simply. Telek watched from his delegation's assigned seating. In the 3 hours aboard the human vessel that had brought them to the Council, he had reviewed the data crystal Kim had provided. The evidence was damning. Systematic violation of the Concorde's own founding principles regarding the treatment of developing civilizations. "The admission process exists for a reason," argued Counselor Pai of the Moro Collective. "New species must demonstrate cultural compatibility and commitment to Concorde values." Kim smiled. "Like the values expressed in the Charter: protection of developing species, non-interference in natural cultural evolution, equitable resource sharing." She gestured, and the central holographic display activated, showing mining operations on a world where Stone Age natives were being driven from resource-rich lands. "This operation on Xarlan IV has extracted 19 trillion credits worth of rare minerals," Kim stated. "The indigenous population has received nothing while suffering displacement and environmental destruction." Counselor Pei's facial appendages flushed dark blue, a sign of embarrassment in his species. The Moro Collective controlled those mining operations. "Isolated examples of policy implementation failures don't justify appending our entire admission process," said Counselor Rin, her feathered crest rising in agitation. 342 examples, Kim corrected, across 17 Concorde-administered sectors. The display changed to show a series of reports, each documenting violations of Concorde regulations. Telek recognized many of the worlds shown, places where resources were being extracted while native populations remained unaware of the wider galactic community. "How did you obtain this information?" demanded Bach. "We've had observation posts in those systems for years," Kim replied. "Initially, we thought the Concorde might be protecting these developing species. Eventually, we realized the truth." A murmur ran through the chamber. Several delegates were frantically consulting their data terminals. "And what of the 3 species you claim are being deliberately isolated?" asked Bach, skepticism heavy in his voice. Kim nodded, and the display changed again. 3 worlds appeared, one oceanic, one desert, one shrouded in thick clouds. "The aquatic Neri of Telos VI," Kim began, "achieved radio technology 8 decades ago. Their signals have been systematically jammed by Concorde orbital platforms to prevent them from detecting off-world mining operations in their outer system." The display zoomed in on artificial satellites clearly marked with Concorde insignia. "The Vex of Kadara Prime," Kim continued, "a silicon-based intelligence that evolved alongside their desert world's crystalline formations. Their natural communication method uses quantum entanglement, a fact discovered by Concorde researchers, who then established a quarantine zone to study them without their knowledge." The final world rotated slowly in the display, and perhaps most troubling, the mist dancers of Iran II, an atmospheric species whose biological technology rivals many Concorde achievements. They've been ready for contact for over a century, but remain isolated because their unique biological engineering would compete with several major Concorde industrial sectors. Silence fell over the chamber. Telek watched as several council members exchanged uneasy glances. These were not minor violations but fundamental betrayals of the Concorde's stated mission. "These allegations require investigation," Bach finally said. "They've already been investigated," Kim replied. "By us. The evidence is conclusive." She stepped forward, her voice taking on a new intensity. Humanity could have chosen many paths upon discovering the Concord. We could have remained hidden while building our strength. We could have allied with discontented member species to form a rival coalition. The implied threat hung in the air. Instead, we chose to join you, but as equals, not as supplicants, and we require the Concord to live up to its own stated ideals. Councillor Tun of the Tulai rose from his crystalline seat. I move that we consider the human proposal. Shocked gasps filled the chamber. The Tulai were founding members. Their support lent tremendous weight to the human position. The proposal violates our most basic protocols, objected Councillor Rin. Perhaps, Tun replied, his crystalline body catching the light. It is time to re-examine those protocols. The humans have shown us uncomfortable truths about our implementation of Concord principles. Telek watched as lines of alliance and opposition began forming throughout the chamber. The moral collective representatives huddled together, clearly disturbed by the exposure of their mining operations. The militant Jex delegation seemed almost admiring of human boldness. The ancient Pala observers remained inscrutable as always. Bach raised his staff again. We will recess for 6 hours to consider this proposal. He fixed Ambassador Kim with a hard stare. I suggest the human vessels adopt a less threatening posture during these deliberations. Kim smiled. Of course, but our embassy ships will remain at their designated positions, as is our right under Article 17. As the council members filed out, Telek approached Kim. You've created quite a stir. That was the intention, she replied. Change rarely comes without discomfort. And if the council rejects your terms? Telek asked. Kim's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes hardened slightly. Then humanity will pursue alternative arrangements for our place in the galactic community. Several of your member species have already expressed interest in closer bilateral relations outside the Concord framework. The implied threat was clear. Humanity was prepared to fragment the Concord if necessary. As Telek watched Kim confer with her team, he realized the true brilliance of the human strategy. They hadn't just outmaneuvered the Concord militarily. They had exposed the contradiction between its lofty principles and its actual practices. In doing so, they had positioned themselves not as aggressors, but as reformers. And reformers with the power to enforce their vision were the most dangerous force in politics, across any species, in any part of the galaxy. The Concord Council chamber erupted in chaos as Telek presented Ambassador Kim to the assembled representatives of 87 spacefaring civilizations. Deception, aggression, shouted Councillor Merrick of the Vrel hegemony. They infiltrated our territories without permission. Kim stood calmly at the center of the storm. The Concord has operated under the principle that might establishes diplomatic standing. We simply demonstrated ours. To Telek's surprise, several councillors nodded in agreement. Perhaps, said Councillor Park of the Orient Systems, this is an opportunity for needed reform. After 3 days of heated negotiation, the Council voted narrowly to accept humanity's terms. The galaxy would never be the same. Later, as Telek watched the formal signing ceremony, his aide approached. You were terrified of them at first, Noro observed. Telek's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. I still am, but not for the same reasons. They could have conquered us. Instead, they're forcing us to live up to our own ideals. He paused. Perhaps that's more frightening than conquest. The Grand Council Hall gleamed under the light of 3 suns. Through the transparent dome ceiling, the stars were visible even in daytime, a constant reminder of the vastness the Concord claimed to govern. The hall had been designed to impress, with soaring columns of rare metals and floors inlaid with precious stones from 100 worlds. Today, that impressive chamber was the scene of the most significant treaty signing in 10,000 years of Concord history. Telek stood off to the side, watching as High Councillor Bach and Ambassador Kim approached the ancient signing table. The massive piece of furniture had been carved from the last remnant of a now-extinct species homeworld. A tradition Telek suddenly found disturbing rather than impressive. The human accords will fundamentally alter the structure of the Concord, Bach stated formally, his booming voice echoing through the hall. For the first time in our history, a new species joins not as a probationary member, but as a full partner with voting rights equal to founding members. Murmurs ran through the assembled dignitaries. Many species had waited centuries to gain such standing. Additionally, Bach continued, his tone suggesting he was reciting words not of his choosing, we acknowledge past failures in upholding our founding principles regarding the treatment of pre-spaceflight civilizations. Telek noticed how the representatives of the Moro collective shifted uncomfortably. Their mining operations had been among the first targeted for reform under the Human Accords. All 17 trade agreements identified in the Human Accords will be renegotiated with oversight from the newly established Ethics Council, Bach declared, and immediate contact will be initiated with the Neri, Vex, and Mist Dancers, species who have been wrongfully isolated despite meeting contact criteria. Ambassador Kim stepped forward. She looked tiny beside the massive High Counselor, yet somehow she dominated the space. The United Earth Federation enters this agreement in good faith, she said, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness. We believe in the stated ideals of the Concord, peaceful cooperation, scientific advancement, and protection of developing civilizations. Our goal is not to disrupt, but to strengthen these principles. She paused, surveying the room. Our fleet will maintain its current positions for 1 standard year as the reforms are implemented. After that time, we will reduce our presence to normal diplomatic levels, assuming all provisions of the Accords are honored. The implied threat was clear to everyone present. One by one, the required signatories approached the table. The founding members first, the crystalline Tulai, the ancient Paula, the militant Czechs, and 17 others. Then the second-tier powers, followed by the associate members. Each placed their mark on the document according to their species' customs, some using ink, others burning their signatures with specialized tools, a few imprinting genetic material. From his position near the back wall, Telek observed the shifting alliances playing out before him. Representatives who had been bitter rivals for centuries now clustered together, united in their wariness of human influence. Others who had chafed under Concord restrictions seemed almost relieved by the promised reforms. A historic day, Noro said quietly, joining Telek. Yes, Telek agreed, though not in the way the council would have chosen. Across the room, a small commotion broke out as Councillor Merrick confronted a human diplomat. Telek moved closer to hear. Your species forced these changes through threats of military action, Merrick hissed, his facial tentacles writhing in agitation. This is coercion, not diplomacy. The human, a tall male with dark skin, smiled politely. Would you have preferred we demonstrated our capabilities more directly, Counselor? We chose words over weapons. Many in our history would have made a different choice. Merrick's tentacles stiffened in anger. You've been hiding among us, spying on us. Learning about you, the human corrected. Just as your observers study pre-contact civilizations, we simply did so more effectively than you expected. Merrick stalked away, brushing past Telek. This isn't over, he muttered. At the center of the hall, the final signatures were being applied. Ambassador Kim and High Counselor Bach pressed their hands simultaneously onto the document, completing the formal ratification process. The Accords were now law throughout Concord space. The human delegation moved with quiet efficiency, dispersing throughout the hall to speak with representatives from various worlds. Telek noticed how many seemed eager to establish direct relations with the newcomers. Power recognized power, even across species barriers. A sudden notification chimed on communication devices throughout the hall. Telek checked his pad and felt his heart skip. Human ships were already withdrawing from high alert positions around several Concord worlds, a gesture of good faith now that the Accords were signed. They're keeping their word, Noro observed. For now, Telek replied. They've achieved their primary objective, recognition as equals rather than supplicants. The reception following the signing was subdued compared to most Concord celebrations. Representatives clustered in small groups, discussing the implications of the new order. Telek found himself approached by Ambassador Kim as he sampled a nutrient solution from the refreshment table. "Ambassador Telek," she said with a slight bow, "I wanted to thank you personally. Your reports to the Council were fair, despite your initial shock at our approach." Telek's scales rippled in surprise. "You've read my confidential reports." Kim smiled. "No longer necessary. But yes, we had access to Council communications during the negotiations. A precaution." "Of course," Telek said, not entirely surprised. "What happens now?" "Now we build something better together," Kim replied. "The Concord has accomplished extraordinary things, united countless worlds. But systems grow rigid with age. Sometimes an outside perspective is needed. And if that perspective is rejected?" Telek asked. Kim's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes hardened slightly. "That would be unfortunate, but humanity has learned to prepare for unfortunate outcomes." As she moved away to join other conversations, Noro approached. "You were terrified of them at first," Noro observed. Telek's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. "I still am, but not for the same reasons. They could have conquered us. Instead, they're forcing us to live up to our own ideals." He paused. "Perhaps that's more frightening than conquest." Noro looked confused. "How is upholding ideals frightening?" Telek watched as Ambassador Kim spoke with representatives of the three newly contacted species, their first official recognition in Concord history. "Because it's easier to resist an enemy than to face your own hypocrisy," Telek replied softly. "Humans didn't just bring ships and weapons to our doorstep. They brought a mirror. And many don't like what they see reflected there." Outside the great windows, the first human embassy ship took up its permanent position in orbit, a sleek vessel clearly designed to impress rather than intimidate. Yet Telek knew that somewhere beyond scanning range, the vast human fleet remained ready. The galaxy had indeed changed forever. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The age of Concord dominance had ended not with warfare, but with a signature on a document and a promise to live up to forgotten ideals. The end